All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Nursing Now podcast. I am your host, Janelle McSwiggan, and I have my dear friend, Jenn Johnson. I'm incredibly excited about this because she is another nurse writer. So, Jenn, thank you so much for coming on today.
Janelle, it's been too long coming. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so Jenn and I have been friends and chatting for a while. Yeah, we're excited about this. And I'm really excited too because Jenn is a completely different nurse writer than I am, which really shows the diversity in what you can do if you're a nurse that's really pulled towards the spoken word. So, Jenn, tell me a little bit about who you are, what type of writing you do, so my listeners can be a little bit more well versed in you.
Okay. So I'm Jenn Johnson. I'm an ER nurse of over 16 years. I am your token Canadian most times. I'm coming out of Hamilton, Ontario. You'll probably figure it out in the about. Um, I have been working bedside for way too long, and the pull towards writing was one that was born out of COVID. So if you want to talk silver
Mm.
linings through COVID, and burnout, this was mine. Working through COVID and the ER and not knowing what the heck's going to happen and all this kind of stuff. I kind of wondered, like, okay, how do you explain to a 4 and 5-year-old if I were to die that mom chose to continue to go to work?
Oh,
And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, how do you do that? I said, well, maybe I should start writing my good stories down. So I started writing my good stories down. And very, very quickly, it became very evident that the bad stories were going to take over and the
no.
trauma that I hadn't dealt with poured right through. And, all these stories came rushing out. And I'm going, okay, what do I do with this? This is, I don't drop this on my kids because this is a lot.
For a 5 year
And
old.
going for a 4 and 5-year-old, you're like, well, I don't think so. This book is going to have to wait till you're way older. And so I was kind of like looking through them and I'm going, what's the key here? What's going on? And I was listening to an online book fair from Llewellyn, and Llewellyn's a metaphysical publisher out of the States. And in this online book fair, the one nurse or the one person who was talking about their book was Intuition at Work. And so they're going on, and the title was Intuition at Work. And I'm like, intuition at work. I use my intuition all the time at work. And it was just like, click. I was like, oh, that's it. I'm like, okay, so go. I went back through all my stories. Sure enough, every single one that stuck out, I had either trusted my intuition or didn't, or said something or didn't, or somebody listened or they didn't. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. So I'm like, okay, so it's, July, August of 2020. I'm, I wrote it in 6 weeks. I do not remember writing it. I just kind of, I don't know if I've blocked it out purposefully or what, but I was just like, okay, just kind of organize it all. And then thinking about it, I'm like, well, we all use our intuition at work. We all know it. Any nurse worth their salt, knows that gut feeling, knows when something's off, and will or will not potentially say something depending on who they're working with. And so I'm going, okay, well, we talk about this all the time at work, but it's very 3 a.m. hushed conversations. It's not, out and loud and proud and with management and all this kind of other stuff. And so I thought, well, I need something behind this because at that time the misinformation, disinformation was really starting to take off with COVID.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I thought, I can't risk my license of putting out this notion plus this or this theory without any supporting evidence. And so I did a big deep dive into the science journals and everything. And not only is there so much information on intuition, but so much information on specifically intuition in nursing. I was like, oh my God, it's there. The science is there and it's peer reviewed and it's evidence based and it's within the last 5 years. I'm like, oh my God, like this is fantastic. So I ran with it. I said, fine, then there's the sign. If you're looking for a sign, that's it. I'm going to put that out there. Am I going to get skewered? Probably. Do I care? Oh, no. I'm in my era of zero Fs to be given whatsoever. If you want to call it my villain era, for sure, I bought the glasses specifically for it.
I
So
love the glasses. I think everyone should tune into the video just to see the glasses. I have glasses too, and they are not nearly as cute or as bold as yours.
listen, I get compliments almost daily on these glasses, and it's very much, I thought it was kind of a branding idea to be like, oh, there's one other nurse writer. Oh my God. Oh, she's got these big bold glasses. I'm
Yeah.
like, man, like, and I know, and I recognize her because of the glasses. So I'm like, you know what?
Funny.
Let me just use this to my benefit here. And I've got these fantastic, weirdo, fun, funky frames. And like, they were like $60 with the corrective lenses. So I was like, sold.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of cheap glasses. And I love that you tie that into your personal branding because I guess have moved away from my glasses for my online presence. I wear them all the time and my friends like know me as the glasses person. Like they'll throw something in my direction and be like, "Oh, watch out, like I know you can't see it." So like and I'm like my vision is not even that bad, you guys. Like it's
Thanks,
fine.
guys.
Yeah, so
Thanks for being
online, I
jerks.
never wear my glasses. Like I have them like right next to me, but they're not on for that reason. So I
Yeah.
love that you have it from a personal branding perspective. That is fascinating to me.
And
So
then when I go to like conferences and stuff, I actually look like my
you are.
profile because again, they
Yeah.
use the profile picture from LinkedIn all the time. And I'm like, well, I want people to actually feel like they recognize me. And so sure enough, it was a game changer at a conference at Health, which was like greater than 14,000 people. It was
That is awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome that you went to health too. I have questions for you that
So
off
many.
the air. So I picked up on so many things that you said. Evidence-based research for backing that nursing tuition. I actually
Yeah.
learned about that nursing tuition in my nursing school.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
stop. I
Yeah,
need to like email your professor and be like, thank you so much for mentioning it.
yeah. They called it like nursing judgment. And they were like, if you ever have a feeling and you can't quite tell what it is, but like you think that something is going on, they were like, you probably have the evidence to back it up. You just don't know what the evidence is at that time. So if you're choosing between two like scenarios or, go with your hunch, go with that feeling. As nurses, we've been
Oh my
trained.
God.
So go with that. So yeah, they call that nursing judgment. So we actually learned about that in my school and they pushed it a lot. My professors did. So yeah, that's
I am
actually
getting full body tingles right
yeah,
now because I
in
am just so
Massachusetts.
excited. Because
Yeah.
my education, it was one professor one time in fourth year who mentioned it very kind of off the cuff. Oh yeah, and trust your gut. And like off you went. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
oh, okay. Like, but it didn't really occur to me that that's what I was doing until
Yeah.
years later.
Yeah. No, that's awesome that you made a whole book about that. I'm just processing this right now. One, I'm not surprised that you wrote something and the trauma came forward because I've also
Yeah.
tried to write things and it just like goes into a dreary place and I'm like, oh, I guess that's what's happening right now. I feel like writing is definitely a form of like therapy and just
Oh
processing
yeah.
like your emotions. So I'm not surprised that it went there. Have you always been drawn to the spoken word, like even when you were a kid, or is this something that just happened at COVID?
No, like I honestly I thought I was going to write a book as a kid. Like
Me
I
too.
kind of always went that way, but
Yeah.
with nursing school, any love of writing was beaten out of you
Oh yeah.
very very quickly. So I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this sucks." And so then, you finally graduate and you're tired and you're just getting used to bedside and then you get
Yeah.
married and then you have kids and then it's a whole
Mhm.
16 years later you're like, "What the hell just happened?"
Yeah. And your creativity is totally zapped sometimes. It goes through
Yeah.
phases.
Oh
Yeah. As
yeah.
a little kid, I always wanted to write a book too. My mom always thought that I was going to become a writer when I was a kid.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Oh yeah. So and my friends too, like they know that I write now and they're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense for you. So and I'll talk to other people that want to be nurse writers and it's the same type of narrative. Like I've always liked writing. So it really does sound like something that's like in your core of cores. Like you're
Yeah.
always pulled to it. The same way that like someone is always like humming a song or like, doing that type of thing. I feel
Yeah.
like some people just have a knack for it.
We've each got our gifts, like easily. And it just was super buried and took its sweet, sweet time to come along.
Came out with a lot of trauma.
Well,
Thank you,
and
nursing.
working, and so we didn't have daycare when everything first went down in March.
Yeah.
So, I was working straight nights and I look back now and I'm like, oh, thank God we had actually switched to a continental because I don't think I would have survived on a 4-5 waterfall had it been 4 straight nights, 5 off, 4 straight nights, 5 off.
Mm.
because I would stay up all day with the kids because they were so young, and then barely nap, and then go to work, and then barely nap, and then come home, stay up, and it
Gosh.
just I was a zombie. I shouldn't have been nursing, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. During that time, I did not have kids, and I constantly was like, what are all the parents doing right now?
Drinking, drinking.
How are they
This is
surviving
why
this?
anybody who was like on the cusp of like, really daily drinking, oh, we were shoved right over the edge into daily
Sounds like a
drinking.
true writer, though.
Oh, yeah, here's like the let me bring some addiction issues into the forum. And I mean, maybe that's why I don't recall writing it.
I mean, I probably wouldn't want to though either.
That's fair.
So, but it made a beautiful book. And what is the name of your book? For mine.
So nursing intuition, how to trust your gut, save your sanity, and survive your career.
Love it. And do you have a second book coming out, perhaps?
Nursing Power is in the works. It's done and ready to go. I think I actually, now that I've had some time to sit on it, I think it might actually need more stories. So now
Oh,
I have to dig into something that I thought I was done with, and
mm,
the creative process of coming back to it and back to it and back to it. And
wow.
because it's maybe half the size of Nursing Intuition. So my lovely editor, who literally just sent me the final edit yesterday, um, she was like, "Oh, I cut out like 11,000 words." She goes, "You're kind of repetitive when you're really trying to get a lesson across." I'm like, "Oh, that's good to know."
Oh, really drives it home though, I'm sure.
Yes, yes. I'm like, "Well, that's 11,000 words less to print, so cost of printing goes down." I think that's a win.
That's true. So you're going the traditional method of having a publishing company because I know some people have been self-publishing, right?
So I had a traditional publisher.
Yeah.
I got one in 2020,
Hmm.
2021, and signed the paperwork. It was all done. I was so excited. I waited 2 years because, again, it takes a lot of time to get into the queue for that publisher. We got to a point where I thought we were already moving into editing, and I was maybe 9 months out from getting it released,
Mm.
and they dropped me. They said, "Oh, hey, we're going back to physiotherapy books. That's kind of our bread and butter. We're giving you your rights back and all this other stuff, but we're giving it back to you." And I'm like, "Pardon?
I don't want it back. I
I
want you to do
don't.
the thing with
You
it.
signed it. You signed the contract. Come
Thank you, I
on." But
guess, but
oh, you're just like so had two
uh,
solid days of complete wallowing, and
I know.
you think that, oh, your life's over, and that was the whole point, and now you've got to potentially, like, what do you do? Do you spend the time to reapply to publishers to wait another 2 years to get it going, or do you try and bootstrap the cash to just get it done? So
Yeah.
I decided to just bootstrap the cash and get it done, and so it's finally just about out, and I'm dying inside because it's been, ever. It's been three
Yeah.
years waiting for it. And so, learning about all the last minute processes of getting, a content editor or a developmental editor, and then a line editor, and then a proofreader, and then the typesetter. And I'm going,
Oh my
where are all these
gosh.
extra where are all these extra steps coming from? Like, what the hell is a typesetter? So, fun fact, typesetter is actually the person who designs the interior of the book to make it look nice. So
Oh,
if there's designs that they want to put in, so if there's ever a book with like really fun, cutesy designs at the top of the
yeah.
chapter heads, or the chapter heads like look weird, or they're fun or funky or whatever,
Uh-huh.
those are the people who do it. So I'm like, oh, I guess that's the next step. So I'm like, oh, and a proofreader. I'm like, I thought the editor was going to be the proofreader, but no,
Yeah.
that's
Two
a whole
separate
nother
things.
level,
Yeah,
two
I just
separate things.
learned that they were two separate things. And I was like, are you sure? That sounds pretty
I'm
specific. So do you have
like,
like a mentor helping you with all this? Because this sounds just like a behemoth task.
it is a behemoth task. I am just figuring it out as I go, which is very me.
Yeah.
You just figure it out step by step. And, thankfully I had the summary of things, of how things were expected to go after the book moved into editing from the publisher. So I kind of had like a rough expectation of like, oh, editing is supposed to take this long, and then cover design comes after that, and then
Mhm.
line editing, and or then proofreading, and then typesetting, and da, 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 da. So I
Wow.
kind of had an idea from that, but truly, it's been the people that I've hired to do the work, like the editing and
Hmm.
the typesetting and all this. They're the ones kind of saying, okay, so next steps are, and I'm like, oh,
Oh, thank
so
you.
another cost, another time delay. I'm like, oh
Wow.
my God, this thing was supposed to be out like late October, and here we
Yeah.
are, December, and I'm losing my marbles because I'm like, just
Yeah.
go. And then the other part of me is like, if I push it to December or to January 1st, then I've got another year for referencing.
Oh, yeah.
If I say it's, published January 1st, 2025, I'm like, oh, I don't know. We'll have to see how that works.
Well, I mean, so many people say that like success is found when you leave the bedside, but this is a really good example of why you shouldn't leave the bedside.
Don't, if you're, if you love the bedside, stay at the bedside.
Yeah.
Like, as
Yeah.
much as people are like, oh my God, you're gonna be a famous author, and like, you're doing all these things. Like, when are you quitting? I'm like, I'm not quitting. Like,
Yeah.
I can do per diem, I can do part-time.
Absolutely.
I can't see full-time ever again.
Oh, yeah, no.
But new, but part-time's good, and a little bit of agency sprinkled in for the funding of everything. Because fun fact, publishing a book is roughly $10,000
I had no idea. Okay.
between everything. And granted, you can do everything, cost savings wise. There's always ways to kind of work around it and do as much as you can and all that kind of stuff. But, cover design, I had no idea. Editing, I'm complete crap at. I wrote the book, and then I was like,
Of
okay,
course.
so somebody else, yes, somebody else
Yeah.
can take it and typeset and do all these things.
Yeah.
And it always boils down to, I know my hourly wage. What would it take to learn to do to design a cover, to learn to do that, or learn to typeset or whatever else?
Yeah.
So you're like, it's not really worth my while. Plus, it's really nice to finally give it to somebody else and like, oh, okay, it's off my hands. It's out of my control now. I can kind of take a seat back and relax just a little bit.
Yes. I just started doing that with my business this year. I just started unloading tasks and I'm like, oh, this is so nice.
This is so much
Demetrius
fun.
actually
I
recommended
love
that to
Demetrius.
me. Love
Yes.
Demetrius. He's a gem of men.
Oh
And he
yeah.
was like, yeah, you have to try just like letting go because it one gives you a break from being in the center of the storm. So you can like
Mhm.
relax and also look at things from like above instead of from the middle of it. And I was like, that is amazing
Yeah.
advice. And it's helped me so much. Like I don't want to do the tedious things. I want to do like the brain power things. Like,
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah,
it's
that's
even just booking, right? Like booking for the podcast. Like I can't. So podmatch.com is my go-to. It's kind of like a dating service for podcasters and podcast guests.
yeah.
So what they do is you put in your thing. I am a podcast guest. Here's my specialty areas. Here's 10 questions that anybody could ask me at any time. And I'd feel that you get matched with 3 to 5 people every couple of hours. And you can pass on them or send them a message to be like, hey, we matched, and here I am, and blah, 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 and see who matches and who goes where, kind of thing. And it's been fantastic for not only just getting into podcasting and getting a solid footing on speaking and doing all this kind of stuff. And again, another thing to learn, and lighting and all the other
Yes.
things.
Yes.
Um, but it's interesting because I've talked to people who I'd never would have talked to in all my life, like Australia. Like I've done 2 or 3 in Australia now, and they're so lovely. And the
Yeah.
podcasts are great. I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And my PR people, who again, a whole nother, level of cost I was
Wow.
not expecting.
PR
Um,
people, Jen.
PR people, yes, for a
Wow.
whole 3 months. Like they were lovely, and they said, you know what, given, what you're doing and all this kind of stuff, they kind of said, your best bet is podcasts because, you've got a dedicated audience, and these are
Huh?
the people, they're already loyal, they're willing to listen. This is kind of already the way to get to them. So they
Yeah.
said, we will try and pair you with as many podcasts that are in your lane, kind of thing.
Yeah. I found that podcasts are the best way to network, which is pretty much
Yeah.
what you're saying right there. Is just like throwing things out there
Oh
and
yeah.
seeing what sticks to the wall, like loose spaghetti.
100%. And it's the same with LinkedIn, right? Like LinkedIn is
Yeah,
very much, put stuff
totally.
out there and see what goes.
Yeah. And I guess like reach is so wide with LinkedIn too. You never know
Yes.
who's looking at a post, who's out there,
Mhm.
especially like for editors or like people in the publishing industry.
Yes.
And same thing for podcasts too. Like random deals have come through with podcasts that have just been super wild. I'm like, I thought I was only here to be a guest. I didn't know I was coming out with like writing work right now. So
Right?
yeah,
Well,
podcasts are
and so sorry to cut you off.
no, you're fine.
Gritty Nurse podcast. So Amy Archibald Varley and Sarah Fung, who actually live
Yes.
in town with me, which is so, so funny.
Yes.
Who I originally knew them from LinkedIn. I didn't know them in person. So, and the one lives next door to like my best friend. So I'm like, this is so funny. And Sarah and I ended up volunteering at the school library together and like chit-chatting and this, that, and the other. And so their whole thing was their book deal came out of somebody who was a listener, who was an agent, who then was like, oh my God, you guys should write a book, and then pitched that to the big five publishers. And they got published with HarperCollins, which is the big five
Yes.
up here, and they
Yeah.
were Times bestseller.
Yeah, no, I know. Like, first of all, I love Sarah Fung. If anyone hasn't connected
I
with
know.
Sarah Fung, she is another gem of a human being.
Saint. Absolute saint.
Yeah, she is. I've been friends with her for a while now too. Yeah, and I saw their book deal.
Yeah.
And I saw like we were chatting like when it was happening, but I didn't ask like how that came out. So that is so interesting. Yeah, you
Yeah.
never know where
You
opportunity
just never
comes.
know.
And again, that's like putting yourself out there and just seeing what the world will bring back, I guess. Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, wow, that is fascinating. Um, wow, we're not answering any of these questions, but I am loving this conversation.
That's the way she goes. That's always the way it goes, though, right? Like it's just sometimes it's so much fun just to kind of catch up and then you just go
Yeah.
off in some random direction. And that's what makes it interesting, is because you just, let's do this over here. Like,
We
let's go over
have
here.
chatted about most of the things I wanted to talk about just in a way more organic way. But I did want to mention your Nurse's Happy Place affirmation deck because I loved that. And you used one of my ideas for that. I forget which one it was. So talk
Yes.
to my viewers or listeners about that because I think that this is another awesome idea.
Yeah, so the Nurse's Happy Place affirmation deck just kind of came out of somebody saying like, "Oh, you should do an oracle deck or you should do an affirmation deck." And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. I wonder how that works." And again, figuring out Canva, figuring out that it's
Yeah.
54 cards is your average size deck. Figuring out Midjourney and image generation, and just kind of coming up with little slogans that's, like
Mhm.
note to self. And it's like, it's not your job to staff the department. It's, take
Amen.
fuck it, take the time off work, like whatever.
Yeah.
Just do you. And it's a nice little reminder to like shuffle in the morning, pick a card, and that's your message for the day. And it's very much nurse specific. So nurse, for nurses by me. And every one of those images was generated out of somebody else's happy place.
Hmm.
So again, somebody from Australia put in one, you put in one of them's mine. Most of them are from people at work. So both docs and nurses and all this kind of stuff. And it's really interesting to see what people's happy places are, because you kind of get so into your head to be like, oh, this is like my happy place is everybody's happy place. Like a beach is everybody's happy place. Well, no,
Hmm.
some people want to go skiing. I'm like, oh,
Yeah. I
skiing
think
is
that was
cold.
mine.
No.
Yeah. Mine was a ski resort, the opposite of a beach. Yeah, and
So
the
I'm just
deck,
like, oh,
yeah, the deck is beautiful too. Like it is
you.
so gorgeous. Like the back of the deck is so well done. It's a really, really beautiful project that you came up with. I was really impressed when you released that.
Oh,
And
thank
just
you.
seeing, yeah, having you like open the box too, like with our group and everything, and having it right in front of you was like a wild experience to like
So
manifest that.
cool.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't even. And it's not hard. Like, but again, it was a lot of time figuring out Midjourney and how that worked. It's a lot easier now that they've got it within the website instead of going on Discord and generating from there.
Oh
So I'm
yeah.
like, oh, like I got it like the hard way. Of course I got it the hard way.
I know. You're a nurse though. You figured it
It's
out.
fine. It's fine. We MacGyvered the hell out of it. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. And you sold almost all of them too, which is
Just about all of them, yeah.
yeah.
So I'm already thinking about, another run, and,
Yeah, I was gonna
life
ask.
lessons, life lessons, that that came out of China, which I did not realize that, you have to be very careful when ordering off of these websites because, unless you deep dive into where they're coming from, you really don't know. So, Anne Marie, who is my friend who Amy Archibald Barley lives next to, she had already done a deck and she said, oh, I use these people, it was really good, da, da, da. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay. So went that route, went the very basic route, and like, yes, they are beautiful and they're perfect just the way they are. That's exactly how I wanted them, but
Mhm.
the cost per deck with the shipping and then the imports and then the duties and taxes was like, oh, okay, this really isn't like super affordable to do again. So then looking into, somebody local and all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And apparently rounded corners is a huge ask. Like
Oh,
apparently it's a
really?
specialty. Yes, it's a specialty thing that ups the
Oh,
price and
they're
people are
so
so funny about
cute.
it. But I
Yeah,
like the rounded
me
corners. I poke
too.
myself too much.
Yeah, I know. I love the rounded corners. It's like a special pizzazz.
A little bit, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, Jenn Johnson, do you have any advice for nurses listening out there that might want to do something similar? And it sounds like you've done quite a bit. So do you have anything for anyone?
Just goof around and try. Like, why
Yes.
not? Like, just, I tried the blog writing. I figured out that that wasn't my specialty. It didn't quite fit
Hmm.
with where like my style of writing and what I was trying to do.
Hmm.
But I already kind of had that in the bag before I started writing the book. So did it help? Probably. And it started me on LinkedIn and getting people that way. And a lot of
Yeah.
things I actually feel like I should go back through the material just to be like, oh, a refresher about, because now it's sales, right? So selling it, trying to bring it into hospitals for nursing week or getting out there and speaking. Was on a call today and they're like, oh, this is really cool. And we'd like to bring you out to speak. And I'm like, oh, yes, please. Like,
Oh, wow.
so it opens doors and a lot of people think that they can't write a book because it's a big undertaking, but even if you just were to have an idea and then get on chat gpt and say like, hey, what would a good theme for this idea be, or what
Mm,
would a chapter outline for a book about xyz look like, kind of break it down for you a little bit easier so that I'm not the great, I'm not the best at outlines and stuff like that. So to break it down into, okay, well, maybe something about this or that, or, have more stories intertwined, that was kind
yeah.
of, it was a help, more so actually for the fiction novel that I'm writing. That's about like three-quarters of the way done.
Oh, I think I knew
Um,
about that too. Yeah,
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
unstoppable.
Well, night shifts, man.
I
Like
know. And
straight nights.
writer. Yeah, I
And
think
a
I have like
writer. We
two book outlines right now that I'm working on too at the same time.
Cool. And then people pitch you book ideas. So I've got a girlfriend who's like, oh, hey, like I just had this great idea, but I'm not a writer. Here, you can have it. And I looked at this idea. I'm like, this is a fantastic idea. Oh my
Oh,
God. I'm like, oh, I want to get into it. So again, I took the idea, I put it into Chat GPT to be like, hey, what would, a plot line look like for this type of problem and these characters? And I want them to do this. And this is the ending that I want. How do you figure that
yeah.
out? And AI goes, okay, bitch, like, and it just spits it out.
Really?
And then all of a sudden you've got like little chapter summaries and you're like, okay. I'm like, well, we'll just, shovel that away for later. And I sent it
Yeah.
back to my friend to be like, are you sure you don't want to write? Because look, it's pretty well laid out for you. She goes, no, 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 this is your thing and all this. I'm like, I really want to get to it, but I really have to finish this fiction thing first because,
Yeah.
I hired a developmental editor because I couldn't get from A to B, like the middle of the book to the end. And I'm
Yeah.
going, I know where I want to end, but I can't wrap my head around getting there.
Hmm.
And so she went through the book. She had all sorts of edit notes and helpful things and, being able to have it looked at from someone outside again, because you're very much in your head about where you think you want to go and the characters. Well, I know the characters, but they don't. And I didn't explain it well enough. I didn't even mention the main character's name until like chapter 8. So I was like, oh, that's kind of a problem. Whoopsie. So, but then again, changing it again. And so it's a constant kind of work in progress and yeah, leaving it for months at a time. So she edited it July of this year, I think, because everything else with like health and the nurse
Yeah.
approved and everything like that started riding like winding up. So I'm like, okay, this gets left in the background because now I got to pivot and create a business or like, pivot my business and this, that, and the other. So was excessive. It's
It's
been busy.
wild how that happens.
I can't even. Maggie Ortiz is an absolute saint. It took me months and months and months to figure out. That's how I ended up on Rebecca Love's desk.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I've seen her name a
Because
lot on LinkedIn too.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, she's very big in the nurse innovator system.
Mm.
She started Sonseal, the nurse innovators group. I think she's since stepped away from that, but is doing bigger things. So aligned with health, got the nurse pavilion started with health, and the nurses pavilion at health was so wonderful and lovely and comfortable and inviting. It was just fantastic. So it was so well done. And to meet 30 nurse-led businesses and chat for months leading up, and then to kind of get into it afterwards is like so it was so amazing. And I'm thinking about health again, but I'm waiting to see what health is going to do with the nurses because I've already made a comment on somebody from health's thing to be like, oh, I can't wait to see what you do for the nurses. And they're like, oh, big things are on the way. So I'm like, perfect, check mark. I'm just waiting.
Oh, yeah. Keep me in the loop for that. As a
Yeah.
side note, have you heard of NNBA? I'm gonna butcher the acronym. It's like maybe National Nurses Business
Business
Association.
Association.
Yes,
Yes.
love that. Yep,
Oh my gosh,
Lauren,
what's her name? Farah Laurent.
Lauren. Yeah,
She and I were talking and same thing. She said AONL and then the
yeah,
uh NMBA.
yep.
Yeah, that was kind of a thing for her to kind of, she's like, look into that. I'm like, okay, there's like so many angles to like look into right now.
Yeah, yeah. I spoke at their conference this past July,
Way to
and
go.
I know I was so surprised. I was like, this isn't gonna happen, and it did.
For you.
I didn't get a good picture though, because I'm like in all of them. So there's like no proof that I did it, but I did. There's actually some really terrible pictures that I might post anyways.
Just be
Um,
like,
yeah, but they were really, really helpful and like really open to like mentorship and offering advice and everything, like for free, totally pro bono. They're like, yeah, come find us
nice.
in the crowd.
Oh
So
my
yeah, that's
gosh.
a really, really cool organization. They have like a newsletter and everything too. They're really open
Amazing.
towards like writing. So yeah, that would be another one to like think about.
See, and this is why I keep doing all these because
Yeah,
I always come out with more than I give, I feel like.
yeah. No, you gave us a ton, Jen. Okay,
Ah.
we gotta wrap this up. I know I could chat with you all day. So all right, Jenn Johnson, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to another nurse writer and to finally have you on. I hope you have a wonderful shift.
It's going to be great. Have a good one.
All right, bye.
Bye.